Have you ever held back from taking action because you were waiting to be perfect? The truth is, perfection is an illusion, while confidence is power. Confidence allows you to start before you're ready, to speak even when your voice shakes, and to move forward despite uncertainty. In today's video, we'll explore why confidence beats perfection every single time, and how it can completely transform your life. Perfection creates fear. Confidence builds action. At first, this phrase might sound like a motivational slogan, but when you examine it closely, it describes one of the most common struggles people face in their personal and professional lives. The pursuit of perfection can be paralyzing. It sets an impossibly high bar that leaves little room for mistakes, experiments, or growth. Confidence, on the other hand, has the power to unlock doors because it gives you permission to try, to fail, and to try again. Understanding this difference is the key to building momentum in life. Perfection often begins as a desire to do well. You want your work to shine, your efforts to stand out, and your actions to be free of flaws. On the surface, this desire seems admirable. However, underneath it lies a subtle trap: the fear of not being good enough. When you equate your worth with flawless performance, you start to obsess over every tiny detail. Instead of focusing on progress, you fixate on avoiding mistakes. This fear can show up in small ways, such as endlessly revising a document, or in big ways, such as delaying major life decisions because you don't feel ready. The irony is that the more you chase perfection, the less action you take. Fear thrives in uncertainty, and perfectionism feeds that uncertainty. Imagine preparing for a presentation. If you're driven by perfection, you might spend hours tweaking your slides, rehearsing every sentence, and worrying about whether people will judge you. By the time you finally present, you're drained, and often your delivery feels stiff. Confidence approaches the same scenario differently. A confident person knows the slides don't have to be flawless. What matters is their ability to connect with the audience. Confidence says, "I may not know every answer, but I can handle what comes my way." Equally, that mindset reduces fear and allows authentic expression. Taking action requires risk, and risk always involves the possibility of mistakes. Perfectionists struggle here because mistakes feel like evidence of inadequacy. Confidence reframes mistakes as stepping stones. Think about learning a new language. The perfectionist might hesitate to speak until they know every grammar rule. Months or even years pass, but they rarely practice conversation. The confident learner, however, jumps in, mispronounces words, laughs at their errors, and keeps trying. As a result, their fluency grows much faster. It's not that confidence eliminates mistakes, it makes you willing to move through them. This principle applies to leadership as well. Employees are more inspired by leaders who demonstrate confidence in decision-making, even if those decisions later require adjustments. A leader obsessed with perfection may delay choices, analyze endlessly, and wait for ideal conditions. The result is stagnation and missed opportunities. A confident leader says, "Let's move forward with what we know, and we'll adapt along the way." Progress comes from momentum, not from waiting until everything is flawless. Confidence also has a ripple effect on mental health. Perfectionists often battle anxiety, self-criticism, and a constant sense of falling short. Confidence lightens that load. It gives you permission to try things without attaching your entire self-worth to the outcome. This doesn't mean confident people don't care about quality. It means they trust themselves enough to navigate imperfection. The freedom to act, even without guarantees, is liberating. Consider creative work as another example. Writers, artists, musicians, all of them wrestle with the temptation of perfection. The perfectionist writer never finishes their book because they keep rewriting chapter 1. The confident writer finishes the draft, knowing it can be improved later. The artist who waits until they're sure every brushstroke is perfect may never share their work, while the confident artist exhibits their progress, receives feedback, and grows. The difference lies not in talent, but in the courage to act. Perfection creates fear by whispering that anything less than flawless is failure. Confidence builds action by saying that effort, even imperfect, is worthwhile. This difference is why some people move forward in life, while others remain stuck in preparation. Fear is like quicksand. The more you struggle within it, the deeper you sink. Confidence is like solid ground. It gives you a stable place to push off from and keep moving. Of course, confidence is not about arrogance or ignoring mistakes. It is about balance. Confidence acknowledges imperfection but refuses to be ruled by it. Confidence says, "I will prepare as best as I can, but I will not let fear stop me from stepping onto the stage, sending the application, or sharing my work." That mindset is what creates opportunities. Perfectionism creates a cycle of delay. Confidence creates a cycle of growth. In everyday life, you can spot these differences. Think of someone at the gym. The perfectionist might refuse to start until they have the right workout plan, the perfect shoes, or the ideal schedule. They delay, waiting for flawless conditions. The confident person laces up their sneakers and starts with what they have. Their progress may be messy, but it is real. Months later, the perfectionist is still planning, while the confident one is stronger, healthier, and happier. The lesson is simple. Perfection is an illusion, and chasing it feeds fear. Confidence is a practice, and practicing it builds momentum. Each time you act despite imperfection, you train your brain to value progress over paralysis. Over time, this becomes a habit. Action leads to results. Results build confidence, and confidence fuels more action. It is a positive cycle that carries you forward in ways perfection never can. If you want to overcome perfectionism, start small. Give yourself permission to launch a project before it feels ready. Allow yourself to make mistakes in front of others. Remind yourself that confidence is not about never failing, but about believing you can handle failure. Each act of courage strengthens your confidence muscle. The more you practice, the less fear controls you. Perfection creates fear. Confidence builds action. These words are not just advice. They are a way of living. If you want to build a meaningful life, you cannot wait for perfect timing, perfect conditions, or perfect skills. You must act with what you have, where you are, and trust yourself to grow along the way. The world does not need more perfectionists holding back their talents. It needs more confident people willing to act, to create, and to share their imperfect but powerful contributions. Confidence inspires trust. Perfection isolates. This truth touches the very heart of human connection. We live in a world where collaboration, relationships, and shared growth are essential to our success and fulfillment. Yet, when someone is consumed by the pursuit of perfection, they unintentionally build walls around themselves. In contrast, confidence builds bridges. People gravitate toward those who believe in themselves because confidence signals reliability, openness, and authenticity. Understanding why confidence inspires trust while perfection isolates requires a closer look at how we interact with one another in everyday life. Trust is the foundation of human relationships. Whether personal or professional, it is what allows teams to work together, friends to rely on each other, and communities to thrive. Confidence fuels trust because it communicates assurance. When you meet someone who speaks clearly, owns their decisions, and embraces who they are, even with flaws, you naturally feel more comfortable placing faith in them. You may not expect them to be perfect, but you believe they are capable. Confidence is less about knowing everything and more about the willingness to navigate uncertainty with steadiness. On the other hand, perfectionism tends to isolate because it projects a need for control and invulnerability. Perfectionists often fear showing weakness, so they hide their struggles, avoid admitting mistakes, and hesitate to share unfinished ideas. This creates distance between them and others. Colleagues may hesitate to collaborate with a perfectionist because they worry about harsh criticism or impossible standards. Friends might feel pressure around a perfectionist because they sense judgment or disapproval. Slowly, the perfectionist's desire to appear flawless pushes people away, even when that was never the intention. Consider a workplace example. A team is preparing a proposal. The perfectionist leader insists on rewriting every section multiple times, scrutinizing every tiny detail, and rejecting contributions that don't meet their impossibly high standards. Team members grow frustrated, feeling like their efforts are undervalued. They become less engaged and less willing to share ideas. The result is isolation. The perfectionist shoulders the burden alone, not because the team lacks talent, but because trust was eroded. Contrast this with a confident leader. This leader acknowledges areas that need work, accepts input, and guides the team with belief in their collective abilities. Even if the final product isn't flawless, the team feels trusted, valued, and motivated to do their best. Confidence also builds trust through authenticity. When someone admits, "I don't have all the answers, but I'm committed to figuring it out," people lean in. Vulnerability combined with confidence creates relatability. Others think, "This person is real, and I can trust them." Perfectionism, however, resists vulnerability. It hides behind masks, creating a facade of flawless competence. People may admire the perfectionist's apparent skill, but admiration is not the same as trust. Trust requires honesty, and honesty is often messy. Relationships in personal life illustrate this dynamic clearly. A perfectionist partner might constantly strive to maintain a spotless home, flawless appearance, or ideal image of success. At first, this can impress, but over time it creates tension. Their partner may feel judged or pressured, like they're never enough. The relationship becomes distant because the perfectionist's standards overshadow connection. By contrast, a confident partner accepts imperfections and laughs at small mistakes. Their presence feels safe and encouraging, which deepens trust and intimacy. Confidence allows room for imperfection, which makes relationships more human and more sustainable. Socially, too, confidence attracts while perfectionism repels. Think about conversations. A confident person listens openly, shares thoughts without fear of judgment, and engages with curiosity. Their energy signals, "You can be yourself with me." People are drawn to that warmth. A perfectionist, however, may overthink every word, correct others, or hold back opinions out of fear of saying the wrong thing. The interaction feels stiff, and others sense the barrier. Over time, people gravitate toward confidence because it makes them feel seen and safe. Another important aspect is that confidence empowers collaboration. Teams, communities, and friendships thrive when people feel they can contribute without fear of being torn down. A confident person creates that environment by encouraging others, celebrating progress, and welcoming diverse perspectives. A perfectionist often struggles here because their rigid standards leave little room for imperfection in others. This can lead to micromanagement, criticism, or withdrawal, all of which erode trust. Confidence also fosters resilience in group settings. Imagine a business project that fails. A perfectionist may withdraw, avoid accountability, or silently blame themselves, creating isolation within the team. A confident individual, however, acknowledges the setback, communicates openly, and encourages learning from the experience. Others trust them more because they face difficulties with honesty and composure. Trust grows not because of flawless performance, but because of consistent reliability in imperfect situations. The irony is that perfectionists often crave approval and connection, yet their behavior pushes it away. They want people to admire their flawless work, but admiration can feel distant and cold. What humans truly desire is connection, and connection grows from shared vulnerability, honesty, and confidence. People don't trust perfection, they trust authenticity. So how can one shift from isolation to connection? The answer lies in practicing confidence over perfection. This means allowing yourself to be seen as you are, rather than as an idealized version. It means saying, "I made a mistake, but I'll learn," instead of hiding errors. It means showing up for others with openness rather than judgment. Over time, this builds a reputation of trustworthiness. People know they can rely on you, not because you are flawless, but because you are steady, genuine, and willing to grow. Confidence inspires trust because it makes space for others. It invites collaboration, fosters safety, and communicates reliability. Perfection isolates because it shuts others out, replaces openness with fear, and elevates unrealistic standards above human connection. The choice between the two shapes not just personal success, but the quality of every relationship you hold. If you want trust, embrace confidence. If you want distance, pursue perfection. At the end of the day, confidence is not about pretending to be strong. It's about believing in yourself enough to be real. And when you're real, people can trust you. Perfection is about hiding flaws. Confidence is about accepting them. One creates walls, the other builds bridges. That's why, in every area of life, confidence will always inspire trust, while perfection leaves you standing alone. Confidence creates resilience, perfection causes burnout. This simple contrast reveals one of the biggest differences in how people handle the inevitable ups and downs of life. At its core, resilience is the ability to recover quickly from challenges, setbacks, or failures. It is not about avoiding problems, but about bouncing back stronger each time. Confidence fuels this process because it gives you the courage to face difficulties head-on, believing that you have what it takes to endure. Perfection, however, weakens resilience. By demanding flawlessness, it magnifies every mistake, drains energy, and eventually leads to burnout. To understand this better, imagine two individuals starting the same demanding project. The perfectionist pours endless hours into the smallest details, refusing to rest until everything aligns with their exacting standards. At first, this intensity might look like dedication, but soon, the weight of constant self-criticism and pressure begins to wear them down. Every hiccup feels catastrophic, every imperfection unbearable. Over time, exhaustion sets in, not just physical fatigue, but mental and emotional depletion. The perfectionist experiences burnout because they carry an impossible load. The confident individual, by contrast, approaches the same project with determination but also perspective. They aim for excellence, but they understand mistakes are part of the journey. When setbacks occur, they don't collapse under the pressure. Instead, they adjust, learn, and keep moving. Confidence provides them with resilience because it tells them, "You can handle this." One setback does not define you. As a result, they maintain their energy and motivation longer, and even after difficulties, they return ready to try again. Burnout arises when the drive for perfection meets the reality of life's imperfections. The human body and mind are not designed to operate at flawless levels without rest or flexibility. Perfectionists often sacrifice sleep, relationships, and well-being to keep chasing their unrealistic ideals. They believe rest is laziness, mistakes are unacceptable, and anything less than flawless is failure. Over time, this unsustainable pattern breaks them down. Resilience, on the other hand, comes from balance. Confidence allows a person to push hard when necessary, but also to rest, recover, and recognize their humanity. Resilience fueled by confidence is visible in how people handle failure. For a perfectionist, failure feels devastating. It confirms their deepest fear, that they are not enough. This triggers a spiral of overthinking, self-blame, and despair. The perfectionist may avoid trying again, fearing another painful blow to their identity. Confidence flips this script. A confident person views failure not as proof of inadequacy, but as feedback. They extract lessons, reframe the experience, and keep going. This cycle of trial, error, and persistence is the essence of resilience. Confidence makes failure survivable. Perfection makes it unbearable. Take athletes as an example. A perfectionist athlete might train obsessively, beating themselves up for every missed shot or lost game. Their body eventually suffers injuries, and mentally they grow exhausted from never meeting their own expectations. Many perfectionist athletes quit prematurely, not because they lack talent, but because burnout steals their joy. A confident athlete, however, acknowledges mistakes, uses them as fuel, and keeps striving. They may feel disappointment, but they recover quickly because they trust their capacity to improve. This resilience is what separates those who endure in competitive fields from those who give up. The workplace illustrates this principle as well. Burnout is a common issue in modern careers, and perfectionism is often at its root. Employees who constantly fear criticism, chase flawless performance, or refuse to delegate tasks end up overworked and isolated. Their productivity drops despite long hours, and their creativity suffers under relentless pressure. Confidence, however, transforms the same environment. Confident employees set healthy boundaries, seek help when needed, and view feedback as growth rather than attack. They stay engaged longer because they can weather stress without collapsing under it. Resilience is also vital in personal life. Relationships require patience, compromise, and forgiveness, qualities perfectionism struggles with. A perfectionist partner may expect flawless communication or constant agreement, which is unrealistic. When conflicts arise, they feel overwhelmed or resentful, which strains the bond. Over time, this leads to burnout in the relationship, leaving both people emotionally drained. Confidence, however, equips partners to handle conflict with grace. A confident individual can admit mistakes, work through disagreements, and bounce back from arguments. This resilience strengthens the relationship instead of wearing it down. The connection between confidence, resilience, and health cannot be overlooked. Perfectionism takes a toll on both the body and mind. Chronic stress from constant self-criticism raises cortisol levels, disrupts sleep, weakens immunity, and increases the risk of anxiety and depression. Burnout is not just about fatigue. It can manifest as a deep sense of hopelessness, disconnection, and loss of purpose. Confidence provides a protective buffer. Confident individuals still experience stress, but they cope better. They take setbacks in stride, maintain perspective, and prioritize recovery. As a result, they protect their health and sustain their energy. It's important to note that resilience doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. Resilient people still feel frustration, sadness, or disappointment. The difference is they don't get stuck there. Confidence helps them acknowledge the hardship while holding on to hope. They trust themselves to navigate through difficult seasons. Perfectionists, on the other hand, often suppress emotions to maintain an image of control. Over time, this suppression intensifies stress and accelerates burnout. So how can one build confidence-driven resilience and avoid the trap of perfectionist burnout? It begins with mindset shifts. First, embrace progress over perfection. Celebrate small wins instead of dismissing them as insignificant. Second, normalize mistakes as part of growth. Each error is a chance to learn, not a sign of failure. Third, practice self-compassion. Speak to yourself with encouragement instead of criticism. Finally, set realistic goals and boundaries. Confidence allows you to strive for excellence without sacrificing well-being. The difference between resilience and burnout shapes the trajectory of your life. Burnout limits potential, leaving you drained and disillusioned. Resilience expands potential, giving you the strength to keep rising despite difficulties. Confidence is the fuel that sustains resilience, while perfection is the weight that drags you down. If you want to build a life of endurance, joy, and fulfillment, choose confidence over perfection. Confidence creates resilience. Perfection causes burnout. This truth matters because life will never be free of challenges. You cannot avoid failure, setbacks, or disappointments, but you can choose how to respond. With perfection, every bump feels like the end. With confidence, every bump is just part of the road. And if you keep traveling with resilience, you will reach places perfectionists never do, because they burned out long before they could arrive. Confidence drives growth, perfection blocks learning. At first glance, perfectionism can seem like the path to improvement. After all, isn't striving for flawlessness a way to become better? But in reality, perfectionism acts as a cage. It keeps you locked in the illusion that you can only step forward once everything is certain, once every detail is under control, once you are guaranteed to succeed. Confidence, by contrast, is the spark that ignites genuine growth. It allows you to step into the unknown, make mistakes, and transform those experiences into wisdom. Growth demands risk, and risk requires confidence. Let's look at how people approach new opportunities. A perfectionist, when offered a chance to try something new, whether it's a project at work, a new hobby, or a leadership role, often hesitates. Their inner dialogue sounds like this: what if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if people notice my flaws? Fear dominates, and the opportunity passes by. They remain where they are, safe but stagnant. The confident person, however, says, I don't have all the answers, but I'll figure it out. They step into the challenge, stumble, learn, and eventually expand their abilities. Growth becomes possible because confidence allowed them to take the first step. This pattern shows up in classrooms, workplaces, and personal lives. Students who chase perfection often avoid answering questions in class unless they're 100% sure. They miss the chance to learn by participating. Confident students, even when unsure, raise their hands, share their thoughts, and grow through feedback. Employees who wait until their presentation is flawless before speaking up may never share their ideas. Meanwhile, the confident colleague presents an imperfect draft, welcomes feedback, and improves it into something exceptional. Confidence accelerates learning because it embraces iteration. Perfection blocks learning because it avoids vulnerability. The fear of mistakes is one of perfectionism's greatest barriers to growth. Mistakes are essential for learning. Every scientist, inventor, or entrepreneur will tell you that failure paved the way to their breakthroughs. Thomas Edison famously tested thousands of variations before inventing a working light bulb. A perfectionist mindset would have abandoned the effort after the first few failures, labeling them as proof of incompetence. Confidence reframes failure as experimentation. It gives you permission to try again and again until you discover what works This resilience is what allows growth to flourish. In fact, history is full of examples that highlight this principle. Think about artists like Vincent van Gogh, whose work was misunderstood and criticized during his lifetime. If he had pursued perfection and demanded universal approval, he might never have continued painting. But his confidence in his vision allowed him to create masterpieces that later transformed the art world. Or consider entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, who launched products that initially failed but kept experimenting until they revolutionized technology. Confidence drove their growth, while perfection would have silenced their contributions. On a personal level, growth requires stepping outside your comfort zone. Confidence whispers, "You can survive this," giving you the courage to attend that networking event, start that business, or speak on stage. Perfectionism, however, chains you to the familiar. It convinces you that unless you are fully prepared, you shouldn't begin. But growth does not happen in the safety of the known. It happens in the messy process of trying, stumbling, and adapting. Confidence understands that learning is a journey, not a final destination. Perfection also blocks learning because it narrows your focus to outcomes instead of process. A perfectionist student might obsess over grades rather than knowledge, memorizing facts for exams, but failing to internalize concepts. A confident learner focuses on curiosity and progress, enjoying the process of discovery even if their grades aren't flawless. Over time, the confident learner develops deeper understanding and skills. The perfectionist, despite high marks, may feel unprepared for real-world challenges because their learning was superficial. In relationships, this principle applies too. Perfectionists often avoid difficult conversations because they fear saying the wrong thing. As a result, issues remain unresolved and the relationship stagnates. Confident individuals are willing to have imperfect conversations, knowing they might stumble over words but trusting that openness will lead to growth. Through trial and error, they build stronger communication and deeper connection. Perfection blocks growth in relationships by silencing vulnerability. Confidence drives growth by encouraging honesty. Workplace innovation is another area where confidence beats perfection. Teams that demand flawless plans before acting often delay progress indefinitely. They become paralyzed by analysis, waiting for the perfect strategy. Meanwhile, confident teams experiment, test prototypes, and adjust quickly. Their willingness to learn from failure allows them to innovate faster. Perfectionists fear making the wrong move. Confident teams understand that wrong moves are simply stepping stones to the right ones. This is why many successful startups thrive, not because they were perfect from the start, but because they learned and adapted rapidly. Confidence also fosters growth because it welcomes feedback. A perfectionist often dreads feedback, interpreting it as criticism or proof of inadequacy. This mindset blocks learning because it shuts down opportunities for improvement. Confident individuals see feedback as valuable information. They might not enjoy hearing about their flaws, but they use the input to grow. Over time, this openness compounds into significant development. Confidence creates learners who never stop improving, while perfection leaves people stuck at the same level, fearing judgment. So how can someone shift from perfectionism to confidence-driven growth? It starts with redefining success. Instead of aiming for flawless results, aim for progress. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Rather than, how can I avoid mistakes? Second, practice starting before you're ready. Take on projects even when you feel uncertain. Each imperfect attempt teaches you more than endless preparation ever could. Third, cultivate curiosity. Approach challenges with the mindset of an explorer rather than a judge. Fourth, embrace feedback as a gift, not a threat. Finally, celebrate small wins. Confidence grows with each step forward, no matter how messy. Growth is not about avoiding mistakes, but about learning from them. Confidence gives you the courage to keep going, while perfection keeps you trapped in fear. Every person who has achieved greatness has walked the imperfect path of trial and error. Those who waited for perfection never left the starting line. If you want to grow, choose confidence. Confidence drives growth. Perfection blocks learning. This truth is more than just an observation. It is a compass. It points the way forward in school, in work, in relationships, and in life. Confidence opens doors, perfection closes them. Confidence says, try and see what happens. Perfection says, wait until you're flawless. And between the two, only one path leads to real transformation. Confidence feels human, perfection feels impossible. This statement captures why people are drawn to confidence and why perfectionism so often leaves individuals feeling alienated, exhausted, and unsatisfied. At its heart, confidence is rooted in authenticity. It embraces the full spectrum of human experience, the strengths and the weaknesses, the triumphs and the failures. Perfection, by contrast, is rooted in illusion. It demands a standard that no one can sustain, a flawless image that strips away the very humanity we all share. To live chasing perfection is to chase a mirage. To live with confidence is to embrace reality and thrive within it. Perfection feels impossible because it is. Human beings are inherently imperfect. We make mistakes, forget things, struggle with emotions, and experience setbacks. These imperfections are not flaws in the design. They are part of what makes us adaptable, creative, and resilient. Perfectionism denies this truth. It says you must eliminate all error, all weakness, all messiness. This demand sets up a constant battle between who you are and who you think you must be. No matter how much you achieve, the standard always shifts, just out of reach. The result is frustration and self-doubt. Confidence, on the other hand, feels human because it accepts imperfection. Confidence doesn't mean pretending you have it all together. It means trusting that you can handle life even when you don't. A confident person might say, "I don't know the answer, but I'll find out." Or, "I made a mistake, but I'll correct it." These admissions don't weaken their credibility. They strengthen it. People connect with confidence because it reflects truth. It says, "I am like you, imperfect, learning, growing, but I believe in myself anyway." That relatability makes confidence magnetic. In relationships, this difference is striking. Perfectionism pushes people away because it creates pressure. Imagine being with someone who insists everything must be flawless. The home spotless, the conversations error-free, the appearances impeccable. At first it might seem impressive, but over time it feels suffocating. You worry about being judged, about not meeting their impossible standards. Confidence creates the opposite effect. A confident partner can laugh at a burned dinner, admit when they're wrong, and show vulnerability. This openness feels warm, safe, and inviting. People want to be around those who make space for imperfection. In leadership, perfection feels intimidating, while confidence feels inspiring. A perfectionist leader demands flawless execution, micromanages details, and rarely admits mistakes. Employees may comply, but they do so with fear and distance. They don't feel comfortable sharing ideas, taking risks, or showing their humanity. A confident leader, by contrast, acknowledges weaknesses, admits when they're wrong, and models resilience. This honesty builds trust. Employees see their leader not as an untouchable figure, but as a relatable human being who believes in the team. That belief inspires them to rise to the challenge. Creativity also thrives under confidence, but withers under perfection. A perfectionist artist may never release their work because it never feels flawless. They erase, redo, and revise endlessly, trapped in the pursuit of an impossible ideal. Their humanity, the raw emotion, the imperfect brushstroke, the spontaneous spark, is lost in the process. A confident artist, however, embraces imperfection as part of the art. They release work that carries their authentic voice, knowing it will never be perfect but will always be real. Audiences connect more deeply with art that feels human than with work that feels sterile and forced. Perfection feels impossible because it demands denial of reality. Life is unpredictable. Circumstances change, mistakes happen, and control slips through our fingers. Perfection says, "You must master everything." Confidence says, "You can adapt." The latter feels liberating because it aligns with how life actually works. When people try to live by perfectionist standards, they often end up paralyzed. They avoid starting projects, taking risks, or entering relationships because they fear inevitable flaws. Confidence frees them from this paralysis. It gives permission to live fully, knowing imperfection is not the enemy but the texture of life itself. Another reason confidence feels human is that it invites connection. When you admit your flaws and insecurities yet still stand tall, you show others it's safe for them to do the same. This authenticity breaks down walls and deepens relationships. Perfectionism, however, isolates. It creates a facade of invulnerability that others cannot relate to. People admire from a distance but rarely feel close. They think, "I could never live up to that," and the bond remains shallow. True connection comes from shared humanity, not from flawless performance. Confidence also nurtures compassion. When you accept your imperfections, you become more understanding of others' struggles. You recognize that everyone is doing their best within their own limitations. This empathy strengthens relationships, communities, and workplaces. Perfectionism, by contrast, breeds judgment. If you demand flawlessness from yourself, you often demand it from others. This creates tension, resentment, and distance. Once again, perfection isolates, while confidence unites. The human spirit is wired for growth, not for perfection. Growth requires mistakes, failures, and vulnerability. Perfection resists all of these, leaving no room for true development. Confidence welcomes them as essential to the journey. This is why confidence feels so natural. It honors the process of becoming, rather than obsessing over an impossible destination. When you embrace confidence, you align with your own humanity. You give yourself permission to be both a work in progress and worthy at the same time. So how do you cultivate confidence over perfection? Begin by embracing your flaws instead of hiding them. Practice saying, "This is me, imperfect but capable." Share your struggles honestly with trusted people. Celebrate effort, not just results. Remind yourself that perfection is not only unattainable but unnecessary. Your worth is not defined by flawlessness but by authenticity, resilience, and courage. With each step, you'll discover that confidence grows stronger the moment you stop chasing impossible standards. Confidence feels human. Perfection feels impossible. This truth explains why confidence is sustainable and perfection is exhausting. People long for connection, authenticity, and growth, all of which require imperfection. Perfection may dazzle briefly, but it cannot last. Confidence endures because it is rooted in reality. It says, "I am human, and that is enough." And in a world full of pressure to be flawless, nothing is more powerful, more inspiring, and more deeply human than that. Perfection will keep you stuck, but confidence will set you free. When you choose confidence, you choose growth, action, and possibility. So stop waiting to be flawless. Start showing up as you are and let confidence carry you forward. If this message inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that confidence is always stronger than perfection.